Hey, what's up guys? Node Investor here. What a wild couple of days it has been in the crypto space. We're going to look at some of the charts, of course. Bitcoin, explosive move that really started on a massive reversal on Friday, followed by some powerful moves here in many of the China names. NEO taking the win, up over 40% at the peak very quickly. And so what is going on out there? It caught a lot of people by surprise, no doubt. This big reversal followed by the incredible parabolic nonstop rise we saw going into my Friday in Bitcoin. And so it has certainly been an exciting couple of days in the crypto space. We'll take a look at that. The important question that I'm getting a lot, and it's a good question, is this a bull trap? Or is this the start of something bigger, another big move within the broader cryptocurrency space? So that's what I'm going to be answering during this video. We'll take a look at a few key items. Of course, look at the technicals, see what the charts are saying, and go from there. So let's get to it without further ado. So as you know, if you've been following along, unless you've totally been on vacation and not looking at your phones, Bitcoin had an incredible move here over the weekend. And this is the 4-hour chart here. And there are very few times in Bitcoin's history where we have seen this big of a move in such a short period of time. But basically within the span of less than 24 hours, 40, about a day's worth of time frame, basically, you saw 30 to 40% move on that, that price range here. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 4-hour candles here, basically a 40% rise, taking the price very quickly from the mid 7,000 range up to the mid 10Ks, $10,000. We were just watching this live. It was insane. We had that first big spike right into resistance, a little bit of a pause, and then into my Friday evening, it just seemed like out of nowhere the next leg up came and just caught all of the shorts off guard. Massive spike. It has certainly been volatile after that. You saw the big drop after that here into the weekend, quickly dropping 15% before spiking here again. Staying above these moving averages, things are looking good. Bullish volume across the board here. But I want to look at that daily chart here real quick before we dive into the details, because the long-term chart is really very important to make note of here as we consider some of the fundamental aspects that may be driving this. I know that there's the China news as being one of the catalyst reasons here. We'll certainly get into that here shortly, but I want to point out a little bit of where we had come from before this big move. Obviously, there was this big consolidation following the June peak that we saw, which ended up break lower from that descending triangle pattern. But then we saw this sideways action, which went on for a couple of weeks. And it was just kind of a matter of time before it resolved itself here. Certainly the sellers were in control here. Price remained below moving averages. For those of you that were catching the live streams and all that, we were talking about that for quite some time. But something interesting happened. You see this big break below range finally doesn't follow through, just kind of sits tight, and then it starts to bounce on the lower time frames, just started to slowly edge back up, and then just had that explosive move. But this is an important break, because what you saw happen here is as price broke out of range to the downside, that was a big shakeout right into a key support level, but you didn't see confirmation on the RSI or the MACD histograms, meaning there was a big bullish divergence starting to form on the daily chart, especially as sentiment was hitting some extreme bearish levels. If we zoom out here and just go to the daily chart here, what I mean by this big support level is there was two big levels that we were watching here. That mid-low 7K range was kind of the price support of last resort. Really needed to hold up there. Otherwise, there was really not a lot of support on the way down. I mean, it was just kind of in no man's land until you get to the 5-6K range here. And so it really was a key level that we wanted to see price hold. In addition to that, that was also a key Fibonacci retracement level. If you look at the bottom, the swing low to the most recent peak here in June, you can see that we lined up very well with the 618 Fibonacci retracement level. So the fact that we had a bullish divergence on the daily chart, we had support hold, we had that 618 retracement after a significant downtrend here following that peak in June, and we saw a bullish reversal from that level on very high volume. all of the things just lined up very positively in favor of the bulls and just led to a massive short squeeze followed by some massive FOMO and additional just piling on the buys, and it just made for a very powerful move, which not only reversed it out of that break from the downside, but also pushed it right through the top of that 8,600 resistance level and into this next resistance zone around that 9,400 level. So just very positive, very good. On the weekly chart, things were honestly not looking too good going into the start of the week. We had already been on this decline. The 10 EMA was very quickly approaching the 22. By all accounts, it looked like it was about to do a bearish crossover. It never did, but it was about to do that. We saw that break, but ultimately what ended up happening is we saw a very bullish reversal candle on that weekly with high volume, and by all technical standards, that is just a positive sign, a bullish sign that generally leads to more upside testing. And so from a big picture perspective, the bulls could not have asked for anything better in terms of defending the support and showing some follow through. Now, the reason, right, is what everyone wants to know. What happened? What's going on? Was it the China news? Was it other things? Was it a short squeeze? And on and on and on. And let's be real. I mean, it was a combination of things, right? There was certainly some technical stars that aligned well that could have set this up. But yes, the China news certainly played a factor. Now, what is the China news? Now, we saw here late last week, China is not bullish on Bitcoin. Let's be clear on that. But what China was saying, and the president of China was talking about how China needs to look at blockchain technology, and has been the case with other major countries, right? They're all talking about blockchain, blockchain, blockchain. And as we know, China, in fact, has been very bearish and anti-Bitcoin. They've banned exchanges, they've banned Bitcoin trading, they've banned ICOs. They've put a lot of pressure on the Bitcoin miners there, and in recent time we've seen a lot of miners move operations to other countries. And so this does not mean that China has switched its stance on Bitcoin, but certainly shines a positive light in terms of cryptography technology and blockchain and it being utilized. And of course, for the cryptocurrency markets, that bodes well in terms of the general sentiment from China. But it doesn't necessarily mean China has suddenly embraced Bitcoin. This in turn, it's a much bigger thing. We're talking about technological innovation. There's, Facebook Libra that's playing a factor here, the US dollar dominance. It's just a much bigger picture in play. But no doubt this was a factor. The sentiment shifted, and we've seen that translate into some of the other names that have been China cryptos in the past year. So another thing here today in recent past, of course, there was another news, right? China Congress passes cryptography law, and again, further supporting the notion of embracing blockchain technology and making it, effective for business and law and that sort of thing, and contract law. And so they're certainly moving quickly, and this is getting the crypto markets excited in terms of the possibility of further adoption of Bitcoin and blockchain tech, digital payments, all that fun stuff. The other thing to keep in mind is we still have the Bitcoin halving that's on the forefront. It's now less than 200 days away. It's scheduled at this point, estimated to be on May 14th. And of course, this is going to be on a specific block, not a specific day, but the forecast is for May 14th. And you're talking about a little over 6 months away from the Bitcoin halving. So between now and May, we could be seeing a pretty interesting crypto market, especially coming off the back of that big weekly reversal that we just saw here. It's going to be real interesting. I'm much more bullish now than I was at the start of last week. It was looking positive in terms of the pullback because we had already come off quite a bit, but the fact that we've seen the reversal now, things are looking much more positive from a long-term perspective. When I say long-term, I mean, the next several months out. So I'm not talking about years, but I'm talking about from a long-term, holding positions type of thing, right? Generally, when I'm trading, it's very short-term in terms of my trading, but from a long-term hold position, what I would consider my investments, this is looking much more positive, and that is certainly a bullish reversal on that weekly chart. Looking at the Bitcoin dominance here, we've seen a little bit of a pullback in Bitcoin here, and then a quick spike higher as Bitcoin regained a lot of ground here very quickly. And other than a few of those China names, it really crushed the alts versus BTC. If you look at the Bitcoin pairs on many of those, as is usually the case, they just were not able to keep up with such a powerful move in Bitcoin. So we've seen that BTC dominance here edge back up to that 68.5% ratio here in the last couple of days here. So let's get to the charts here. So looking at Bitcoin here, let's go very short term now. We've seen that big spike, clearly has broken out of range. When we saw this reversal, and again, it happened just so quickly, I was buying this dip here into the last couple of days. I was doing a live stream, and you know, to be perfectly transparent, I was starting to scale out as Bitcoin moved, and so I missed a chunk of that final move higher. But then, you know, it was kind of one of those, wow, buy the dips at this point. I posted in the Slack group, anything over 8,600 at that point, it's kind of game on, because, you know, we had seen this big range form. You dropped out of that range and then quickly went right to resistance. It paused briefly at that point, pulled back to about 8,300, but it just blasted right through that. And once it started to edge out over 8,600, it was just kind of gone at that point on Friday. We saw it just real time going up 8,000, 9,000. Next thing you know, it was 10,000, 10.6 before the big pullback. And here we are seeing a bounce off that 10 EMA on the weekly, on the 4 hour, excuse me. So where do we go from here? Let me clear some of this here. A couple of levels to be watching. Of course, in the bigger picture on the daily time frames, this 8,600 level is going to be a key level to be watching. Certainly a pullback zone into that would be positive. I would see that as a secondary entry opportunity if you get a pullback that deep. I'm not so sure we will, but if we do, that's something to make note of there. The other thing to note is you may be seeing a little bit of a double top here on this second leg up. But, you know, ideally the bulls are in control here, so you might just see some sideways consolidation here over the next several candles. A little bit of an RSI divergence showing up here. But what I'd be watching here is really more on any pullbacks. How does it act around these moving averages, the 10 and the 22 EMA? If you start to see price hold that, those are usually positive signs. They make for some good trend following technique, especially if RSI starts to cool off as it hits those levels. And then on the upside, you know, we're kind of at this little bit of a resistance zone here. The next level up was really here. You saw a quick wick into that, but not a lot of closing into that. So it's a little bit of a window right now. If it starts to hold over 9,700, then it would be looking like a retest of the Friday highs around 10.4, 10.5 would be your next target. But at this point, it's going to make a lot more sense to start looking at some of these higher time frames, especially if you're taking a little bit of a longer term view of the markets, right? And what I mean by that is, if this is a significant turning point, if you will look back 6 months from now and say, yeah, that October 25th day was a significant turning point, right? Where will price be at that point? And that's what I mean is start taking a longer term look. It's really easy, especially if you're trading and using margin and all that. It's really easy to get caught up with the little 1 hour wiggles and some of the quick spikes up and down. But once you see a big reversal like that, you want to try to hold on as long as possible. You're going to have these big head fakes that will shake a lot of people out along the way. Absolutely. We saw that in 2017. There was a lot of big dips, scary dips. But if you want to take a longer term view, try to hold on. Obviously, if you're, you know, everyone's different. You might want to take some along the way up, but look at the bigger picture, right? What are the next big levels? The big support zone that gave way was around that 9,400. Price is starting to edge higher. 8,600 on the downside. The 10 EMA on the daily are the two key levels I'd be watching on any pullbacks. Above that, the next big level, which was a long time resistance level, was essentially that 11K number. We saw that number tested several times, and it was just not able to take that number out on the way up here. And we saw that test here back in August and then again in September before prices started to roll over. So that's the next major target that I'm watching. And if we want to get really excited, then the next big number is basically 12K. And then you're talking about new yearly highs. Will that happen before December? It could. We know this space moves very quickly, but that's the next kind of big targets on the way up. On the way down, 8,600. If it gets way deeper and starts testing those 7Ks again, that'd be really negative. I'm not expecting that, but considering the high volume that we saw, the big buying volume, pullback would be positive here, a little bit of a breather setting up another run higher. But we saw a similar move back in April. Keep that in mind. We saw that explosive move higher on April 1st. It just kind of trickled up, never gave you much of a pullback, held that moving average on the way up, and just kind of left people in the dust, if you will, on that way up. So could we be seeing another type of move like that here starting? It's very possible. So that's all I'm saying. I'm certainly much more bullish than I was last week. From a long-term hold perspective, from a trading perspective, I'm a little bit more cautious on the shorter term, considering the very strong move that we've seen here. So certainly anything can happen on these very short time frames. You could see a quick spike lower. You could see it just kind of blast higher. It's anyone's guess at that point. Is it overbought a little bit? Yes, absolutely, in the near term. But the best case scenario would be some sideways action here on some of these names here. So let's go look at a few other names beyond Bitcoin and seeing some of the action here. I'm going to go to the 4-hour charts and pull that up here on the higher time frame. So looking at, of course, NEO, big picture view on NEO. I'm going to go NEO BTC here because it's important to note that most of these alts are actually underperforming Bitcoin with this recent move, but NEO has been one of those names that had just blasted through. We were already watching NEO. This was one of the few names that I posted on the watch list last week. NEO had edged out above resistance. It's interesting to see that it paused right there, pulled back, and then just had that powerful move higher, and then over the weekend just really blasting higher. If you go end to end on NEO, just from the swing low to the swing high, just to give you context of how powerful of a move this was. I mean, this was a nearly 50% move, if you go from wick to wick, but just an incredible move on NEO following that recent price action. Now, that's 50% versus Bitcoin. If you look at NEO USD, it's going to look a little bit stronger because Bitcoin was already strong enough, and NEO is outperforming Bitcoin by a wide margin. If you go to NEO USD here, you can see just how much more that shows their 85% move in 3 days. So incredible move on NEO, blasts right through all resistance levels and just has basically a vertical leg higher. Some of the other names here, Ontology. I'm going to go back to the BTC pair. Ontology Bitcoin popping today on that daily chart. If you go to Onto USD, big move up here on this guy. How much is that from the low from 3 days ago? Up 120% essentially. Ontology USD here. QTUM was another big name here in the last couple of days, moving, was that 60% here on the USD side. There was a few others here that were moving pretty good versus BTC. Omise Go. If you look at OMG BTC, big volume reversal. Hasn't quite broken out of range yet. Something I'd be watching here, but huge volume off that low. We'll see if it can finally crack out of range there. Tron had a pretty good move out of that reversal. Big volume on that. Again, was one of those names that was looking pretty good here. This little bull flag started to move higher. Once Bitcoin exploded higher, like most alts, this one gave up quite a bit, but it has recovered quickly here in the last day. If you go to the 4-hour chart, just like a big U shape, right? The big spike lower, found some support, big spike higher. Definitely going to be one to be watching this week. It will be in play. There's another one here. Some of the smaller cap names, like I'm just kind of cycling through some of these China region names, if you will. Wanchain, big reversal there versus BTT. BitTorrent has had a pretty good move here as of late, already up quite a bit. If you look at the swing low from the 23rd of October, up about 25% on the USD pair. And even VeChain, remember that one? VeChain from back in the day, finally showing some life after just kind of being dead for such a long time, up about 50% as well. So many of those regional names showing some good action here in the last couple of days, but it's not all been bullish. If you go to names like Cardano, BTC, right, got smashed pretty good, broke out of range here, broke below this symmetrical pattern, and has not really bounced back here over the last couple of days. And some of the other big cap names are showing similar action. Here's EOS, took a little bit of a pullback, not quite outperforming Bitcoin. Some of the bigger winners, right, as of late have all rolled over quite a bit. Stellar Lumens breaking down. 0x breaking down big time after forming that little head and shoulder pattern. This one was overdue, as I mentioned in my last video. This one was kind of due for a breather, but breaking down. So just a lot of these other names that have been some of the leaders, here's Link versus Bitcoin, have all been showing some pullback here on this recent Bitcoin move. Now, of course, if you look at them from the USD side, they may not look as bad, but certainly have not kept up with Bitcoin as it's been so strong. And that's really going to be the case for most of the alts at this point here. Litecoin's another one that was holding up relatively well and then just got smacked here pretty good on some of this pullback action. And one more before we get going, or two more. We'll look at ETH and we'll look at Ripple. But again, ETH was trying to break out. I was actually looking like it was getting positive. I was kind of excited about ETH, wanting to see this one break out, as that would have really helped the overall altcoin picture. But of course, broke lower and has not really been able to gain traction, still below the 10 EMA versus Bitcoin. And one more, XRP versus BTC here, again, was a long time leader, outperforming Bitcoin and finally getting hit pretty hard, pulling back here and still below some key moving averages. So it's certainly a mixed market. It's not a just buy any alt you can find yet, and it really hasn't been this year. You've got to really be picky. You've got to pick your poison wisely, as they say, and that's just really been the case for most of the last several months. It's not just been this across the board where every alt you can find is eventually going to pop. It's kind of been very selective and continues to be so. Right now, the China names are in play. Those are certainly names to be keeping an eye on as we head into the week. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Over the bigger picture, I'm bullish Bitcoin here. In terms of the alts, I still have mixed feelings. I'm predominantly still Bitcoin. Many of the alts are looking attractive because they're looking from a long-term picture, daily and weekly charts. Like, they are certainly finding a big picture low, and some of them are finally starting to pop off the lows, but we've yet to see kind of this across the board outperformance, as is notable when you look at the Bitcoin dominance, still way up there near 70%. So certainly Bitcoin continues to be the better place to be, and it may continue to be the case as we get closer to the halving. I think we'll see a little bit of more rotation out of Bitcoin once a lot of that halving pump is priced in to Bitcoin. Certainly Bitcoin can keep going higher into that, but as is very often the case, you begin to see the altcoins find a bottom before Bitcoin finds a top, and you'll start to see the rotation start to cycle out into some of those names. So that's the way I'm going to be watching this. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out going into the next couple of days, so look out for another update or live stream. And until next time, take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.